Well, what I will read is a summary of chapter 5 of Philosophical Semantics. The name is Wittgenstein's Verificationism and the Greatest Blunder of Analytic Philosophy. So I begin to read it. My thesis on Wittgenstein's verificationism is the following. As it is well known, he was the creator of the idea. This is in Glock dictionary, for example. The philosophers of logical positivism appropriated his insight as a tool for the attack on metaphysics, attempting to develop it into a general logical semantic principle. In doing so, they created a rigid straw man that had little to do with the principle Wittgenstein had originally proposed to them. A rigid. However, they soon realized that this straw man could not stand, concluding that the verification principle was untenable. Since they were much more influential, this conclusion was passed down as inherited wisdom. As a result, verificationism seems today dead and buried. However, when we turn to a careful consideration of the principle as proposed by Wittgenstein, we see that it remains perfectly defensible. In my judgment, this misunderstanding is the greatest blunder of contemporary analytic philosophy. In what follows, I will try to show why. To highlight the contrast, I begin by presenting the formulation of verificationism initially proposed by the logical positivist Ayer in his words. Here it comes, quoting, "The mark of a genuine factual proposition is that some experiential propositions can be deduced from its conjunction to certain other premises without being deducible from these other premises alone." Calling the factual proposition S, the other premises P, and the observational result deduced O, we can formulate this as S and P, therefore O. The problem, soon recognized by Ayer himself, was that the criterion is too liberal, rendering all propositions true. If S is the absolute is lazy, and P is if the absolute is lazy, then snow is white. Since this implication is true and snow is indeed white, it must be true that the absolute is lazy. Moreover, it seems that S cannot be true or false without already being meaningful. That is, to make sense of this reasoning, you need S as true, P must be true, and O, of course, white snow is white, is true too. But it is willkürlich, it is without reason that you say that S is true if you don't know if this is meaningful. There are all other problems. P is not related to S. In Wittgenstein, as we will see, P flows from S, if there is something like P. Just like this first formulation by Ayer, other positivists' reformulations of the verification principle proved untenable, as Carl Hempel's article from 1950 has shown. Now consider how Wittgenstein addressed this question. Here are a few quotations. 1929-1930. 1. The meaning of a sentence, such is its method of verification. 2. A sentence, if two sentences are true or false under the same conditions, they have the same sentence. 3. A sentence without a way of verification has no sense. The method of verification is not a means, a vehicle, but the sense itself. Determine under what conditions a sentence must be true or false, thus determine the meaning of a sentence. Well, we see here a full-blooded principle of verification where the verification is identified with the sense, with the proposition, with the thought or Gedanke in Frege's sense. For Wittgenstein, the principle is the full cognitive meaning of a sentence, which is true if it is applied and false if it is not. The method of verification is the same as the propositional content, a version of what Frege called thought, Gedanke. Around 1932 and 35, Wittgenstein presented a particularly illustrative example noted by Alice Ambrose. It is worth quoting in full. Considering of how, here is Wittgenstein, 1934 or so, the people from the Wiener Kreis didn't read this. Consideration of how the meaning of a sentence is explained makes clear the connection between meaning and verification. Explanation. Reading that Cambridge won the boat race, which confirms that Cambridge won, is obviously not the meaning, but it is connected with it. Cambridge won isn't the disjunction I saw the race or I read the result or and so on. It's more complicated. But if we exclude any of the means to check the sentence, we change its meaning. It would be a violation of grammatical rules if we disregarded something that always accompanied the meaning. And if you drop it, all the means of verification, all the ways of verification, it would destroy the meaning. Of course, not every kind of check is actually used to verify Cambridge won, nor does any verification give the meaning. The different checks of winning the boat race have different places in the grammar of winning the boat race. The principle, here, end of quotation. The principle appears here as a variety of means or ways of verification which together constituted the meaning of the declarative sentence. If we remove one means of verification, we can remove part of the sentence's meaning. I'm only explaining what he said. If we remove all means of verification, it ceases to have meaning. Moreover, these means differ in value. Some are fundamental, strongly contributing to the meaning, such as seeing the Cambridge team's boat win and hearing the referee's whistle. Others contribute less to the meaning, such as hearing someone say that Cambridge won. Furthermore, there is a causal relation between verification by watching the race and by hearing about, reading in a newspaper, having seen the trophy at a club, and so on. Verification is usually branched, like a tree, the trunk being direct observation, and the branches depend on the trunk. Moreover, what one means by an assertive utterance can be expectantly emphasized. For example, when I say, I know because someone told me so. It's possible, however, to present a more precise general formulation of verificationism a la Wittgenstein, according to which meaning naturally flows from the declarative sentence as ways of verification. To this end, I consider S to be any declarative sense and call the verification rule the sum of means of verification hierarchically constituting the meaning of S. As a result, the principle of verification, or VP, becomes VP is equal the cognitive meaning of a declarative sentence S, which is equal the rule of verification for S. That is, by definition, the cognitive meaning of a declarative sentence S is the same as a synonym of the rule of verification for S. Well, and as I said, the rule is a trunk with branches, normally, with ways or means of verification. Something much more sophisticated, but nuanced than what the rigid way the Wittgenstein tried to do. Wittgenstein had no interest in debunking the metaphysics. He liked some metaphysicians. Consider the analysis of a simple example using VP regarding the sentence 1. This piece of metal is magnetized. Following Wittgenstein's advice, if you try to explain the meaning of 1, this piece of metal is magnetized, we will find that the verification rule understood as a sum of means of verification, each mean with a value, semantic value. One explanation is as follows. A magnetized piece of metal attracts iron objects. This is a piece of metal, and this piece of metal attracts pieces of iron. Hence, 1 is true. Hence, this piece of metal is magnetized. The meaning of one is the verification rule whose effective application equals its assertion. The rule is nothing more than what we understand or mean by one, by this piece of metal is magnetized. Nothing could be more intuitive. My conclusion is that Wittgenstein's principle of verification should not be seen in terms of an essentially logic semantic principle, as the positivists wished, but rather as constitutive of a pragmatics of factual discourse, showing that we should select and organize the principal types of declarative sentences and analyze the verification rules in an investigation reminiscent of the speech acts theory. Well, I will stop here, and the next time I will end refuting the main counterexamples and objections to the principle of verification, but now this kind of principle of verification that has nothing to do with the strawman the positivists have built.